So Chris and we're based in the US, but we have clients all over the world. We are high conflict divorce strategists who specialize in something called legal abuse. So all of our clients have dealt with some type of domestic violence, and their exes are using the legal system to wear them down and bleed them dry financially. So ours are the craziest cases. We help men and women. And we noticed that parental alienation is basically baked into legal abuse. It is one of the most common things that we see in our community. And that's why our next book, this is just a paper copy of the cover, but it's coming out in March. And we're actually going to be with Charlie when it releases that week of March 18th in London. So anyway, but let's just get right to it.
Well, I'm going to just reintroduce myself again because we weren't actually recording that bit. So for the benefit of the recording, because I didn't hit the button. So I'll just repeat that again. My name is Charlie McCready. I'm a parental alienation coach. And I help with parents who are going through this awful experience of an alienator parent who's trying to destroy their relationships with their children. We are going to be talking this evening about one of the stages, because our webinars cover different points in time, but this is the stage at which the divorce process is beginning. And I'd just like to add something really, really positive. In the last 7 weeks, 4 separate parents have reached out to me to say that their kids have reached out to them to make contact. And this is just amazingly good news. It was 3 parents as of 2 days ago, and then a 4th parent reached out. So the stuff that we are going to be saying to you today, it's got some real value, and the things that we can give you advice on actually helps to rebuild those relationships. So I just think that's so cool. And it's so nice that these parents have reached out to let me know. So
Yeah.
Chris, I think you are comparing us from this point in time forwards.
Absolutely. So I'll put on my MC hat and got my orangutan here and to help if we need them. But just a couple of quick housekeeping things. We're going to be an hour long in this session. You can leave a lot of people have their cameras off. You can leave them off. That's just fine. If you want to put them on, we love to see your faces. And we're going to talk just a bit about some questions that we got. For about 45 minutes. We're going to answer some questions that we had ahead of time. The chat is open, so if you're not a Zoom veteran, you can, along the bottom, depending on what kind of device you're on the bottom of the window, you can open the chat panel and you can type something in that. I'll be watching that. This is going to be Lisa and Charlie doing most of the talking. I'm just going to give them the questions. So put a question in there. I'll try and get that to them in the last 15 minutes or so. And then if we want to go beyond Lisa and I or Charlie, Charlie, you do discovery calls with people who want to work with you, right? Is that how you start?
I generally do the discovery calls only when we're doing the 9-step program, because that's such a kind of a large piece, and I need to understand how to tailor that service. But
Awesome.
otherwise, people can contact me through the website and on social media.
None of us are big multinational corporations. We are very easy to reach. So just reach out with any questions. We love helping people. We're happy to help. So did I forget anything, guys?
Nope, we're just going to do the Q&A for the last 10 to 15 minutes. So basically, we have some questions that we get asked all the time, but we're happy to take your questions, which you could put in the chat anytime.
All right, very cool. So the first one I had on the list was what are the behaviors of alienating parents during the split, and how do we deal with them? So when it sounds like when a split is happening, actively separating.
So I think I was going to jump in with that one. So there's a couple of different aspects to that. That one of them is what they're trying to do with the kids, and the other one is what they're trying to do on the legal side. Just starting with so I'm best prepared to answer for the kids. What we often see is that the alienating parent, and for those who are new to these webinars, there's a very strong correlation between people who are alienators and narcissism. Now, I know narcissism is a word that's bandied around an awful lot, but I pretty much haven't come across a case where I've been working with parents where the alienating parent doesn't have some sort of clinical mental disorder. Normally cluster B narcissism seems to be quite prevalent. And what happens is these people are recognizing that their relationship with you is coming to an end. And so they start preparing for that. And so part of that process is beginning to get allies to their cause. And those allies can be your friends, your family. They will start giving negative narratives to schools, to doctors, to anybody who will listen, basically. But most importantly, this is the point in time when they start ramping up the pressure on the kids. So we did discuss something called pre-alienation previously. Pre-alienation is basically the beginnings of the campaign to either subtly or overtly get the kids to start aligning with that parent into the loyalty conflict. And we generally see an increase as they approach divorce because they think, I'm going to come out of this relationship. I don't need to be loyal to you as a partner anymore. I'm just going to preserve my own interests. So we often see the alienation beginning to ramp up, and we see the children's behaviors changing insofar as we often see the children becoming a little bit more reserved with us. They might stop talking to us about their private lives. They might be a little bit rude with us. And I think we're going to talk later about how to help the kids. But these are the sorts of behaviors that we can both anticipate from the alienators. So if you're at the early stages of divorce, you should be looking out for all this stuff because that's what's likely to be happening.
Yeah, and so sort of a follow-up to that one, what are some feelings that kids are likely to be experiencing at this time during that stage?
Yeah, so there is something called the loyalty conflict, which is basically one parent is putting pressure on the child to align with them versus the other parent. And it's a very confusing time for the child because they naturally don't want to be caught in this position. So they can feel incredibly pressured. We also start seeing things such as false choices. So the child might be asked to start making choices about, well, do you want to spend time with dad or do you want to spend time with mum? They're encouraged to take the perspective of the alienating parent as well. And these false choices are false because the kid doesn't actually have a real choice. It's they have to come up with the option that the alienating parent prefers. And this is all part of the adultification process as well. So it can be very, very subtle. But the loyalty conflict is something that's going to appear again and again and again in these webinars because it affects the child right the way from the early point in time through to the time you're trying to reconnect with them later on. And it's one of the most painful things for them. It's the one thing the kid doesn't want to experience because they feel caught in the middle between the two warring parents. And generally speaking, anything that you can do that reduces the pressure on the child in feeling that will help your relationship with them. So I hope that kind of helps answer it at a high level, Chris.
Yeah, for sure. And then just sort of shifting a little bit to like the legal side, right? Because if we're going through the divorce, we're in the legal process. And what are some of the common behaviors of an alienating parent in the legal system? And how does this set the scene for financial and legal problems that control dynamics down the road?
Is this something you'd like
Well,
to jump in with, Lisa?
yeah. I mean, so the legal stuff, like these are the things I think that kind of are indicators as well of high conflict divorce. And Chris and I actually have a book out where we have a little chapter or a big chapter on that. And we go through several different factors, but I'm going to think of one in particular, and that's that when you are dealing with someone who has narcissism or an active addiction, they're not even thinking about what's in their own best interest, and so they end up causing these cases to go on and on and on. We always think about how your ex, once they get out of that day to day with you, is really limited to three things: money, kids, and the court. And so money and the court go together, but kids last the longest. So they're going to do whatever they can to keep these things going. Um, somebody who also has narcissism in the legal process, and children, like Charlie mentioned, will make the kids choose between the two of you, but they also have this sense of entitlement. Like, of course, the kids are gonna choose me, and that entitlement carries over into financial issues as well. So, like I said, when you're dealing with someone who has impaired judgment, that person isn't interested in being logical. They're not interested in moving forward, settling down, going on with your life, doing what's in the kid's best interest. They're only concerned about themselves and what works for them, and feeling like they're winning and they are leaving you. And those of you who know us, you probably hear me say it a lot. They want to leave you homeless, penniless, and childless. They want to completely destroy you. So that can cost conflict is very, very expensive. So it carries over into the financial end as well in the legal process, because they feel like what's mine is mine and what's yours is mine too. And so, of course, the kids are part of that. The money, they will not share their financial discovery in most countries around the world for a divorce. Even if you haven't been married, but you share children, you have to come up with numbers to figure out child support, for example. And so these people will act like, well, this is my money and I don't need to share that information with you. And you should just accept what I offer you. So that just makes things really, really difficult and ends up blowing up the divorce financially as well. And that's why I think part of what Charlie and Chris and I want to focus on is to lower the conflict as much as possible with these people, so you're not spending tons of money and time and energy if possible.
I'd love to add a little bit as well, because and what's great, I love these conversations because whenever we're talking about them, it always kind of sparks additional stuff that we know.
I know.
And I think those, just as you were talking about, I was reminded about the non-compromising nature of the narcissists. These guys refuse to take blame. They refuse to say sorry. They refuse to see that they've done anything wrong. And you guys see this all the time, which is it's really difficult to mediate with them, which is why so often we end up going into that court situation. And something else they do all the time is they're basically liars, and they're also like conspiracy theorists. So they because they have this propensity to be quite immoral themselves, so they will go off and have affairs and then accuse us of having an affair, but we've been quite innocent. Or the best one, because links in exactly what you were saying, Lisa, on the financial side, they will often try to hide money, and then they accuse us of hiding money. But it's all linked in with their system. They're just being really comfortable with lying, which is what they're
Yeah,
doing.
and
It's lying.
they with the money, they'll act like we don't have any money, we have to cut down a lot, but they'll be spending money on themselves or whatever they think is okay.
Yeah,
So it's that total double standard.
yeah, yeah. And they also ask for way more than they think they're ever going to get from us.
Yes.
All right, guys. So we've been kind of focused on the actual, like when you're in the actual divorce process, but there's of course no, it's not that alienation is always early stage when you're going through the divorce and it gets more serious later. Like the
Mhm.
stage of the alienation does not necessarily match the stage of the divorce. So with that said, focusing on early stages of alienation, is it possible to influence kids that are in early stages of alienation, like in other words, to like make it stop or slow down, regardless
Yes,
of where you are in the divorce?
absolutely. And this is one of the hardest things for parents, and it makes us feel particularly powerless because the tactics that the alienating parent is using is basically trying to turn them against us. And again, just back to the point that Lisa was making a moment ago, they hate us. At this point in time, they absolutely hate us. We should not get confused about, oh, maybe they're going to be compromising. Maybe I can kind of reach some sort of arrangement with these people. That tends not to happen. And if they do seem like they're compromising, be really wary, because it means they're just trying to get something out of you. But what these people tend to do is they start putting a lot of pressure on the kids. Now, if you try to play the same tactic by saying, "Oh, well, your mom's a bad person or your dad's a bad person," whoever the alienating parent is, you basically start a race to the bottom.
Mm.
And they will be prepared to go way lower than you will ever go. And because they don't, it's an odd thing about the alienators. They don't recognize the damage that they're doing to the kids. They only recognize the hurt that they're exposing you to, and they will do anything they can to hurt you. So the best thing for the kid, and it's actually a policy that I would advocate the whole way through, is you need to be the calm parent. You need to tone down this whole loyalty conflict to try and take the pressure off the kid. So yes, it's legitimate to turn around at this point and say to the child, there's two aspects to everything. Parents have got different views. Try to use examples that is relatable to the kid, maybe about their school friends, about how their school friends don't always get on together, but each person is kind of right in their own way. So create a kind of a balanced view with the child, and keep giving them. I talk about love, care, and support, and I see them as being different things. So love is unconditional love. So if they're being a little bit off with you, that they're doing that because they're feeling pressure, and what they still need from you is that unconditional love, because the love from the alienating parent is conditional. They have to do stuff to earn that love from that parent. So give them what they need, which is unconditional. The care is putting a roof over their head, putting clothes on their back, putting food in their stomach. One of the things that we sometimes are tempted to do as a parent is, if our child is not being nice, cooperative, and loving to us, we might seek to punish them by, taking things away from them. And don't do that. Absolutely continue to support, give them all the care that they need, and all those things, as if your relationship was perfectly normal. And the third one is support. So they still need to know that, they're a good kid, that they're doing all the right things in their life. So that you basically have to work pretty hard to create as much normality and stability in the child's life. And it can seem very counterintuitive at the time, but it is your best form of defense ultimately. And that's the other thing as well, just on that word defense. If you as a parent find yourself constantly defending yourself against the accusations of the other parent, you're actually criticizing the alienating parent. And what you're doing is you're putting that kid into the loyalty conflict, because you're keeping that war going. So you want to be constantly looking at ways of kind of disarming what the alienator is saying, but in a kind of a subtle and supportive way. It's very, this whole approach is very, very subtle, but it's also very effective.
And
As you're
Charlie,
saying
you
that,
said,
Charlie, oh, go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, you said something at the beginning that I want to see if you would expand on it the same way I would, which is, you said they don't recognize the harm they're doing to the
Mm.
kids. And I think what we usually mean when we say that is they may or may not be aware of it, but they don't care,
They
right?
don't care.
So by recognize, like, it doesn't change their behavior whether they realize it or not. They do not care.
I would go a step further as well. Yeah, I would totally agree with you, Chris. I think not only do they, I don't think they even really recognize it, and they definitely don't care. I would go a step further and say very often the narrative to the child is not just being negative about us as the target parent, but it's always they position themselves, I'm the only parent who can look after you. I'm the only parent who can keep you safe. I'm the only parent who will give you the love you need. And so they try to position us as somehow being, unsafe or not loving, or we're only focused on ourselves. They want to try and give the impression that we're abandoning the child. So we really have to look at all the things that we're being accused of and make sure that our behaviors demonstrate to the child that we're not doing all of those things, but we have to do it through our behaviors and through this loving, supporting approach, rather than trying to get embroiled in the conflict, because that's what the alienator wants us to do, because it actually works in their favor when we do that, because it
And
empowers
the
them.
other thing about accusations, Charlie, which is like intelligence gathering, is because they project,
Mm.
right? An accusation can give you, we always say every accusation is an admission, right? So when they
Absolutely.
make an accusation, you can go check out. Maybe they're doing this, as we see that a lot for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Whatever they're projecting onto you, typically they're doing themselves. And I think a key word of advice for parents with this as well is a lot of the people, in the same way that a lot of the people who are the alienators, the alienating people are kind of narcissistic, or, some of them even worse than that are psychopaths, sociopaths. Um, we tend to be very empathetic people. So we tend to put others ahead of ourselves. We're kind, we're good-natured, we're trusting, we're hopeful. That's who we are. Um, and so often the alienator is playing a game of chess where they're looking way down the road. How can I hurt this person? How can I get the most money? How can I get the kids on my side? And we're playing checkers because we still think everything is that we're just trying to be nice. We're trying to be
Fair. We're
compromising.
trying to be
Yeah,
fair. We don't want to be
exactly.
selfish.
No, and we feel bad about being selfish. And so
Mhm.
we have to learn to start playing chess like them. And all these points that you're just alluding to, Chris, and you as well, Lisa, about the characteristics of these people, they're predictable. So we need to start getting ahead and say, right, what is this person going to try and do to me in terms of hurting my kids, in the legal stuff? And we need to start thinking weeks, months, even years ahead of what are the things they're going to be doing now that are going to have an impact later. So we need to be like 5, 7 moves ahead of them all the way through.
Yeah.
All right,
Um,
so that
one sec, Chris. I knew this. I was like, there's going to be so much to talk about, so much that comes up besides. So, Charlie, I'm thinking when you talked about the emotions when dealing with kids like that and how we have to show them love and care and all of that. These kids can be really hostile and
Mm,
disrespectful.
mm.
But I'm wondering if this is the topic for a totally separate meeting because hostility and aggression comes up very often. And with a target parent, they don't know how to deal with it. When you talk about counterintuitive, it feels terrible. It feels like the
Yeah.
person that I got away from is now embodied in my child and I'm stuck with them. And then I have all these conflicting feelings. So I'm supposed to love them, but they're
Hmm.
attacking
Hmm.
me.
Yeah. So we will absolutely go into a lot more detail in this in the later webinars. But so there's three, but I'll answer it very, very, I'll just touch upon the surface now. There's broadly, if you think of alienation as a spectrum that the kid is going to sit on, you've got mild, moderate, and you've got severe. The stage that we're talking about now, kids are typically in the mild to moderate. So moderate is starting to be a bit ruder, starting to be more rejecting, starting to abandon the parent more. The severe is where they've gone no contact, and in some instances, kids are already starting to go that direction in these early stages, but it tends to be less common. It tends to be a little bit later in the process. But but when a kid starts being really difficult with you, it's not about you. And this is the thing that's the hardest thing for the parents to get their head around because the parent is thinking, I have had a loving relationship with this child to this point in time. Why is this kid turning against me? And they treat it like it's almost like they think that the kid is it's reflecting their relationship with the child. It's like that the child is damning us, and that's not what's going on at all. The child is starting to put up coping mechanisms to protect themselves. So this being rude is just a mechanism for the child to keep themselves safe from the alienating parent, because the alienating parent doesn't want them to have a relationship with us. So they go along with that. So they start being rude with us. But it's not about you. It's about them looking after themselves. But of course, we take it personally,
Mhm.
and we have to learn not to do that. That's why this stuff is so counterintuitive. And if you do take it personally, you're going to react badly. And if you're thinking very negatively about your kid, you can't do the love, the care, the support, because you're not in a good space to be doing that. So it's like if you want to do the thing that's going to help your kid, you have to recognize what they're going through, what their experience is, and recognize your experience and why you're reacting in the way that you are. And as I say, we'll go into this in way more detail later on, but that just kind of answers it at a surface level.
Yeah, for
We are
sure.
masters of detail and being loquacious. So I'd like to, if it's okay with you, I'm going to move on to the next one. All right, this one's for
Yeah.
you, Lisa. What's the most important thing if you're whatever you're going through that like what you could do legally to protect yourself and your kids in the process?
So, Chris, you know your nickname is the PP guy, the parenting plan guy.
We're
The
working
most
on a new name, but
Yeah, yeah.
the most important thing you can do legally to protect yourself and your kids is to have an airtight parenting plan. Chris, do you want to talk about this or do you want me to
yeah,
say it?
I mean, just a little bit. I want to be conscious of the time because we're
Yeah.
just about at the bottom of the hour. But yeah, so many people go through some horrific divorce. Mine took 3 years, just fighting about everything, and you'll finally get out of it. Right at the end, there's a step that needs to happen. You need to get a parenting plan put in place. And where certainly I'll speak for myself. I was so fatigued at the end that I had no energy to learn like what needs to be in. I was like, just get it done, just get it. I don't care
Mm,
what's in it, get it done. And that causes so many problems because when you do not have crystal clear rules, like when you're co-parenting with someone post separation, your parenting plan, that's the rule book. That's your constitution, we
mm,
always say. If it is has gray language, things are open to interpretation. You're going to do your best and your most sincere effort to follow it by the best you can interpret it. What do you think your ex is going to do? Your ex is going to interpret it however they want to, however is most advantageous, whichever way will introduce the most chaos into your life. So right at that point, when you're exhausted from going through the legal system and you don't have the energy, you need to summon the energy to get the parenting
mm,
plan right.
mm,
Or
mm.
you need to summon the support from someone who knows how to
Yeah,
write it
yeah.
properly. Because
So
one of the
it's
biggest mistakes that we see word wise is the word reasonable because it's too squishy. They're never going to be reasonable, and reasonable is very, very gray. So we only put the word reasonable in if it benefits our clients. So it is so important. The worst, the number one reason people are back in court post judgment is poorly written parenting plans. And
Mm.
remember that lawyers are generally not trained in writing high conflict parenting plans. So they're just like, oh yeah, everybody's angry. You'll figure it out. Legal decision making, it's shared. You'll go to mediation. That's it. I mean, it's a nightmare. So getting a solid parenting plan is the number one way to protect yourself and your kids.
And I would say I would completely advocate people going to you guys to get assistance with that because it's a bit like the Donald Rumsfeld, you don't know things you don't know.
Yeah.
And you guys have got so much experience in this, you could help somebody write such a better plan. I have a question for you as well. Do you include like what happens if they breach it? Because I think
Oh, yeah.
oh,
it's a
Chris, I
leading
keep
yeah.
picturing
question.
you with a cape that says pee pee man.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so
Parenting plan man.
it's the key, Charlie. Like you want to think through every possible scenario, make sure the guide, the rules in your parenting plan are crystal clear, not anything open to interpretation, that there are ways to settle any kind of dispute that are not just like you have to agree, right?
Mm,
But then
mm,
for violations, deadlines, consequences, what happens when somebody doesn't follow this? What are, exactly, you want to think of every scenario. When I review parenting plans, what I do is I go through and I put on like my narcissist hat. I say, if I were the problem, what language in here could I exploit, right? what
mm,
what could I misinterpret intentionally where I'd still look reasonable in interpreting that way, but no, everybody knows it wasn't intended to be that. How could I be evil with this document? And I find a lot of stuff. And it's not just like Lisa said, it's 100% true. Most lawyers don't understand high conflict, so they don't know what needs to go in there. But on top of that, even the ones that do, lawyers are sloppy in our experience.
mm.
We have seen a parenting plan, at least on at least one occasion I can think of, that our client shared with us that had a prior client's name in it that she had gotten from her lawyer. They do that. They use templates. They want to
Templates. Yeah,
crank it fast, billable hours, fast, fast, fast.
yeah.
And so you really can't, you cannot make, shortcut that part. That part you need to put some effort into, whether it's, hiring someone or learning or really sitting down, whatever it is, you have to get that part right. It's the best way to prevent problems down the road, including fighting alienation. That's, you can put terms in there that talk about
Yeah.
your interactions with your kids, that phone calls shall be private and you can reach out whenever you want. Like there's a lot of stuff
The
that
therapy
specifically applies.
clause.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep,
Can I tell
100%.
I know that Chris is the compare, but I'm going to ask another question because this is so important. I think you guys have talked in the past about how you fit the parenting plan and the whole child custody within the context of the other aspects of, like the money side. Because, is there some benefits, the leverage of, not agreeing the money side until you've agreed the child side, for instance, or kind of, do you have any thoughts on kind of tactically or strategically what people can do to get the best outcome for that child plan?
Chris, you want to answer or should I?
Well, I would say my answer is there's no like single rule, like do money first, then kids, or kids first, then money. At least maybe you want to expand. I would just say there's no specific approach that puts one part ahead of the other.
No, but I mean, custody affects money.
For
So
sure.
we do a lot with, we call it strategic negotiation, and we do a lot with mediation, even though I know a lot of people don't think it's possible. It is difficult, but there's a lot you can do even outside of a mediation room through strategic communication. So I think that there are ways to influence someone with custody, with money, but whatever it is, however it's done, you want to make it seem like they are benefiting personally. That whatever this thing is that you're negotiating, because we know they care about money more than they care about the kids.
Totally.
So ways to use money where it's going to be more convenient, it's going to be cheaper. And we don't suggest giving up child support to get better custody, because that doesn't work either. But there's it comes into leverage. But it is two separate things in most places. Like you figure out the parenting plan and then you deal with the money. But you can mix the two. It really depends on the
I,
case.
I would so recommend that anybody who's dealing with this absolutely goes and speaks to you guys, because there's so many layers of complexity to this as well, like the age of the children, because exactly as you said, Lisa, the alienators have a focus on money rather than the child's benefit. Very often the alienators are thinking one thing when the kids are like 8 or 9, because they don't really want to be parenting them because they're very selfish people, or they want to control the kids just to hurt you, but not really to be a strong parent with that kid and give them all the things they need. But then when they become teenagers, they change their attitudes. And that's where the parenting plan has to still be sufficiently robust that, because they're thinking money, money, money. If I take the kids now, I get teenagers, they take themselves to school, they feed themselves, they dress themselves, they look after themselves, and then I can get child support from the other parent. I don't really want the kids with them, but it's not going to interfere with my life too much. So it's like there's so many levels of gradation which we just don't have the time to cover here.
Yeah,
But it's
not today.
it's so important that people go and have conversations with you and get your support
Yeah,
to do
and
this.
if as we're talking, if you guys want to put stuff in the chat about topics that you need help with that probably can help a lot of other people, we are planning our next webinars. I already think about the aggression thing. I am also thinking about stuff with teenagers and how they specifically target teenagers with alienation versus younger kids. But any ideas, put it in the chat. All right, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, for sure. And this next one's for you also, Lisa. And that's thinking about, when we talk about when we're in the divorce process, we're talking about like factors that judges use to make decisions in custody cases. We talk a lot about the 6 alienation factors. What are those?
Yeah, and I mean these each are big, and Charlie talked about one of them in particular, but these are the general factors that we use to build a case. And again, keep in mind that when we work with our clients, we go deeply into this. So just for the sake of time, I'm going to go through them quickly. So the first one is one that Charlie mentioned. We call it sending poisonous messages about the other parent. Especially we call it the 3 U's, that you are unsafe, unloving, and or unavailable. The second one is when someone blocks contact and communication. And that's when the parenting plan, and why the parenting plan is so important, because that can be one of the easier ones to establish when someone's clearly not allowing you contact or communication when you have agreed on it or it's court ordered. The next one is erasing and replacing. So that involves if they have a new partner and they're encouraging the child to call that new partner mommy or daddy, because there's only one bio mommy or daddy in cases like these. Or even if someone has cut you from access to your children's records, medical, school, being on extracurricular things, so that when you don't know about things, you don't show up, and then the child thinks that you're not as interested in them as you really are, but you didn't know about it. Another one is encouraging a child to betray your trust. So we often see parents, alienating parents, encouraging children to become like little spies. They, when they come back to the alienating parents' home, they will grill them. That happens all the time. But also they may encourage your children, depending on their age, to go through your stuff, get into your phone, go into your computer, take pictures, go into your drawers, send them back to the alienating parent, who then rewards them for being a spy. The next is something we also touched on a little. I think, Charlie, you said minimizing your authority, making themselves seem like I'm the only real parent and you're just going to that person's house for a visit if I even allow it, making it seem like they're the one who makes the main decision. And with our clients, we see a lot of them trying to convince our clients that they have to do the same thing in their household, the same rules that the alienating parent comes up with, or you're going to somehow get in trouble with the judge, or you're not co-parenting properly. And then the last one is encouraging dependence in a child. Now, certainly if you have really little kids, they are dependent, but a lot of times alienating parents want kids to be their supply. So they will treat them like they're babies. I know Chris's ex used to lay out his boys' clothing till they were like into middle school, but making it feel like they need them. And also we see kids who get older feeling like they can't even make decisions for themselves because they've been groomed to believe that they're incapable and they have to keep calling mommy or calling daddy to see what they think first, and using money especially to keep that dependence. Okay, I'm done, Chris.
All right, thanks
I could
very
go
much.
on and on. I'm just like,
Great,
Yeah,
great answer.
I'm responding to some stuff in the chat too, and you guys are dealing with some stuff. So thanks for sharing that there, and I'll go back to that in a second. But Lisa, let me follow up. Who are the professionals that you should consider involving in your case, and why?
Okay, so I'll just get into a couple. Now, a lot of times in these kinds of cases, people want a custody evaluator or a GAL, a guardian ad litem. Sometimes somebody called an AFC, attorney for the child, or minors counsel is appointed. It's tricky. So when you have an attorney for the child or the minors counsel, and they call it something different in Massachusetts with a different abbreviation, but basically that person, the child is their client and they have to report what the child says they want to do. This is awful for alienation cases because kids who have been brainwashed will say, I don't want to live with this one parent. Now, a guardian ad litem or custody evaluator doesn't do necessarily what the child wants. They might listen depending on the kid's age, but they do what's called the child's best interest. And so we often tell our clients, if you have a guardian ad litem, keep in mind that one of the main custody factors is that the child should have a relationship where each parent supports that kid's relationship with the other parent. And nobody is supposed to be undermining that relationship, no matter what, basically, unless you have some crazy case where there's been all kinds of abuse and neglect, because even people in jail, kids are still believed that it's better to try to have a relationship with that person. And of course, there's things involved, even if there has been abuse, where the person has to be working a program. But anyway, so with custody evaluators, it can be very, very expensive. Sometimes it's good to have a forensic evaluator who really gets underneath, who's trained more deeply than someone who just listens to what the kid said, because a lot of third parties, like a pediatrician or a child's therapist, can be manipulated by an alienating parent. And that's a much bigger issue. But probably the most important professionals that you can have involved with your case are mental health professionals, specifically family systems therapists, who look at the entire family as a system, even though the two of you aren't together anymore, where they will try to work with you individually. And the child is the client, but it's not always with the child, and it can really vary in terms of how it's done. Sometimes a reunification therapist could be helpful, but again, like whoever you choose as a mental health professional, really has to have a background in dealing with domestic violence and an understanding of alienation, because a lot of people don't, and they can be led to believe that it's not really what it is. So that domestic violence background is helpful. We've interviewed a woman named Marissa Dessa, who happens to be a therapist who's also trained in something called DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. And she told us that when you have a therapist who also has a background in DBT, she works with personality disorders, and she actually loves it, which I think is kind of crazy, but whatever. But when you have a therapist who's trained in that, they know how to influence people like your ex. So if they're working with someone like your ex, they can find ways to make them feel good about doing the right thing, even though if you told them to do the right thing, they wouldn't listen to you. So the main thing is, you want to have family systems therapist. You want to have, I'll mention just the thing with the parenting plan, therapy clause in there that says that you should be allowed to have therapy as you're writing the plan. It shouldn't be a major decision, because we know people like your ex probably won't agree with it. So mental health professionals like family systems therapists, maybe a reunification therapist who has to be vetted carefully. That's something we actually talk about in our new book that's coming out, the When Your Ex Turns the Kids Against You. We have a whole chapter on choosing the right professional. But for the alienation stuff, a forensic might be helpful, but that is very, very expensive.
Mm. Can I just add something? So I think
Yeah.
a great part of the value that you guys bring as well is all these people that you've just talked about, having the right people to support you. So many of the individuals out there are not qualified to deal with parental alienation cases.
I
So
know.
because the psychologists, as a profession, still don't recognize this, they recognize aspects of the behavior, but not collectively the damage it does. And we see this happening all the time, so, and this affects the gals and the psychologists and even the people doing the forensics. They don't understand, many of them don't understand alienation. Many of them don't understand that they're just simply being lied to. And the whole voice of the child comes as well. So, I mean, it's all the stuff that Lisa, you and Chris do in helping people to select the right professionals is so important.
Yeah, because they could do so much damage.
Yeah,
It's the
yeah,
wrong person.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So yeah,
Yeah.
not all gals are equal.
No, not at all.
All right. So your guys, Charlie, you can make a call here. It is quarter of. We had talked about going to the Q&A. There's a couple of questions in the chat that we can get to, but I think could we do one more? And I want to lead in, I have a question for you, Charlie, but let me lead in with a quick one from the chat first. Is that all right?
Absolutely
Yeah.
fine. Yeah.
All right, cool. So the one from the chat, somebody asked, and I'd love to hear this too, is you mentioned earlier about three alienated kids who had reached back
Mhm.
out to the parent. It just happened recently. Can you talk a little bit about like what prompted that? How did that happen?
So each of them were very, very different. So in fact, there's four of them now. So one of them was
One just happened on this call? Like,
no, what I only found out about one of them like yesterday.
Uh,
So it's like it just keeps on happening at the moment. So one of the families, there were two boys. One boy was being a lot more alienated than the other. He was about 15, his brother was about 13. The the alienator was focusing on the 15-year-old boy. So the 13-year-old was still going in between the two parents. And what the target parent did is she didn't give up, so she kept trying to send him texts. She was turning up at his soccer games. She was accepting the fact that he didn't feel courageous enough to stand up against the alienating parent. So she was there very much in that unconditional love, supportive role. And it gave him the confidence when he was kind of hitting 15. Maybe I can reach out to my mum, particularly seeing his younger brother was still in contact with her. So that was one example, and that was just her persistence and her kind of loving approach. The one that reached out yesterday, now that's a girl who's probably, I think she's 18, maybe coming on 19 at this point in time. Really very little contact with the parent for 2 years. She started going to university or college rather. And that was a catalyst for her because it meant that she felt less monitored by the alienating parent. And again, because he'd consistently kept reaching out, kept trying to text her, pretty much I don't encourage people to do phone calls, but texting is good. And again, because she felt that the door was open, she started having some text conversations with him. And as I discovered, they spent time together over Christmas. They were playing board games. One of the things you will find with alienated kids is their personas change. So this thing I was saying earlier, when your kid starts changing their behaviors, don't see it as kind of a ratification as you as a parent. It's got nothing to do with you. It's the child protecting themselves, and when they start feeling more comfortable within themselves, those personas start changing back to their old selves. The third family, it was two kids, in fact, something very similar. Both kids were in university, but one of them more was kind of the later kid to go into university. And it was the second kid who was younger who reached out to the alienating parent, which encouraged the first kid to also start reaching out as well. That's still at a very tentative stage, and they're still kind of texting, a little bit of phone call conversations, but the the same opportunity now exists for that parent to really start rebuilding that relationship in earnest. And the last one, the kid was also about 18, not going to university at this point in time, but he just decided out of the blue to drop in on the alienating parent's sister, who he had a good relationship with, and then out of the blue dropped in on the alienated parent and said, let's have a cup of coffee. Now, I talk a huge amount about parents being ready and healed, and you can feel very powerless at the point in time your kid is no contact with you. That's the moment to take that opportunity to really go and do the inner healing work on yourself. Because when a kid turns up at your doorstep and asks for a cup of coffee, or a kid phones you out of the blue, if you're not in a good space, a healed space yourself, and what I mean by that is you're not going to be angry with the kid because that creates a barrier to getting back together. And if you get triggered by stuff, that makes it very difficult for the kid, because anytime you get triggered, they're feeling, oh, this parent is not safe, they're uncomfortable. This feels like the loyalty conflict again. So the work that I've been doing with those parents was helping them to prepare for those moments when the kids would start reaching out. Because trying to do that healing work on yourself at the point in time you're also trying to help the kid with their healing, that's much harder. So that for every parent here, there's a lot you can start doing right now. It doesn't matter how where you are in the process, there's a lot you can do right now that will help you either today or tomorrow. And you just don't, there's no guarantees when your kids are going to reach out, but never give up hope. And always, just know in your heart, at some point in time, my kid's going to come back to me, because that is what happens for the majority of us.
Yeah,
Yep, no
we've
matter
seen
how
it with
hopeless it looks, right?
yeah, we've seen it. We've seen it. And some of us talking right now have experienced it.
Yeah, yeah. And me too, me too. I had 5 years of no contact with my own kids, particularly with my youngest kid. And oddly, I was the person who suggested to my kid that I'm going no contact with you. And I presented it. I didn't pitch it to them that way. That would have been really cruel. But I pitched it to them as we're going to have a holiday, because what I could see was happening was the damage that was being done by the alienating parent was so difficult for my child to accept that every time they met me, it was getting harder and harder and harder. And I thought, okay, I'm gonna draw a line in the sand here. We're going to stop the rot where it is. I'm going to give her that space so that, and it was really hard to do this, but it was the most loving thing I could possibly do as a parent, was to give them that space so that that pressure was removed from them. So I basically I allowed my child to be taken out of the loyalty conflict because there weren't two parents trying to control trying to control the child. And that was a hard thing to do. But I always knew in my heart that I was going to get back with my daughter again. And 2 years later, it happened. And I did the same thing as I recommend to everybody else. I kept the text going. I kept the text going. I kept the text going. Virtually never, I very seldomly got replies, but she knew that I was always there, that I loved her and I was available. And when she was ready, then we could start rebuilding. And that's what happens with their kids. They just need to know that we're always there for them.
Wow.
All right, thanks, Charlie. So the bad news is we're not going to get to any more of the questions in our list that we started with. The good news is that we've got an agenda ready for next time. So whenever we do the next one, but there is one that came in the chat that we're not going to be able to answer in the depth that it deserves to be answered. But somebody asked about what we call, I don't know if this is a global term or just an American term, but the silver bullet, right? Which to us means somebody, during a high conflict separation, as the divorce is starting, usually one party makes a false accusation of domestic violence or something like that, gets a restraining order, and that informs that sets the foundation for the whole thing, may even apply to the kids as well. So the restraining order, as we've talked about a little bit, applies to the kids. It's called the silver bullet because it's so effective in just like setting the tone of the whole future of the post-separation arrangement. So a lot of times kids are recruited to support this false narrative, dad did this or mom did this. What can be done about that? And I know we've got about 5-ish minutes to talk about that before we wrap up. So
Yeah, Charlie, have you seen that? We see that regularly. We just met with a couple of people like in the past week and a half who had met an attorney. Both of these individuals had young children, and the attorney was like, get a restraining order, get the kids out, and let's start the whole process where your ex won't be able to see the kids. And I was like, no, don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is kind of race to the bottom territory because we don't really want to be doing things that the alienator is. If you do something to to a narcissist, they will do anything to get you back.
Right.
So, I mean, one of the reasons I often say to parents, be really wary about even going to court because, in certain circumstances, you absolutely have to go to court. But we see false accusations happening all of the time, and it's a key weapon because, as Chris says, it kind of creates this future state of often children having false memories about, or starting to have false memories put into their subconscious about you as a person. And a lot of these things are really sick, like sexual abuse allegations being made against us. That's a favorite one. So
Yeah.
then, CPS, DCF, various social services get involved. They have to come and investigate it. And typically the child then resides with the alienating parent because you are considered unsafe while the investigation goes on. In a lot of cases, the investigations then come back, thankfully, and say, no, there's nothing to find. But, 6 months can have passed. And during that time, the kid's been with the alienating parent all the time, being more enmeshed into their narrative, truly believing some of the stories that are being told about them. They now perceive you as being a very unsafe parent. And then often the courts can say, oh, well, because you haven't had time with the kid and you need to try and reunite with them, they end up and doing crazy stuff like supervised visits and really restricting the time that you have available. They don't always go back to where you were before, like the 50-50 or the 60-40 or the 5-2-2-5, whatever the arrangement was. So I mean the silver bullets can be so damaging in the impact it has on us and the kids. But you guys must be seeing this a lot as well.
Yeah, and also I like the woman one of the women that we were talking to the other day who said my lawyer told me that that's how we should begin this case, that we should go really hard. I said, think about the impact that's going to have on your family for the rest of your kid's life. It's not just now this battle. This is going to have long-term effects to
Mm.
start off like this. Um, and there hadn't been domestic violence with the kids. And in a lot of places, we separate, and this is very hard because our clients are all dealing with some type of domestic violence. Custody factors are different from domestic violence. And so even when you've been abused by your ex, they're not necessarily going to keep them away from the kids. So safety has to be the top priority. But if somebody has, some warped behavior, which a lot of our exes do, that doesn't mean that you're going to get custody and they're not going to see that other parent.
No.
So to start off like that, and it also makes you, if you don't have some really well documented patterns of behavior or something extreme,
Mm.
you can end up losing your kids later because you're going against that main value of supporting the child's relationship with the other parent. So
Um,
it's very, very tricky.
It is, and we've also seen parents who are nervous about the likelihood of a false allegation being made against them, particularly of a sexual nature or a domestic violence nature, and so they've had to resort to putting video cameras around their houses. So literally CCTV to monitor and to be able to demonstrate, no, the instance that you're talking about never actually happened, or they encourage members of their family to be with them while they're with the kids and it can be very difficult for parents because the thing that helps the kids the most, even when they're being really difficult with you, is to just be in your company. Because when you don't see them, they don't have the opportunity to experience who you really are as a person. They don't have the opportunity to see that you're being loving, compassionate, caring towards them, regardless of how they're behaving towards you. But if you are no contact, you don't have that opportunity to provide that balance to what they're being told, not by sitting there and saying, I'm not the person you're the alienating parent is telling you I am, but just by your being. It's how you conduct yourself, because the kids pick up all this stuff subliminally. So, subconsciously that they understand who you are. You don't need to tell them, they'll see it. But it's hard because you have to kind of endure and carry on seeing them, even though your house is full of CCTV, or you have to get people to come in and basically act as witnesses every time you've got contact with them, depending on the contact arrangements. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's like you have to plan for this stuff, almost so that you don't get caught in the false accusation.
As you're talking, Charlie, I'm thinking one of our next things has to be about false allegations and smear campaigns, because that's a
Mm.
bunch of the questions that we also wanted to talk about that we,
Yeah,
as usual, ran out of time.
but that's okay. We'll just take it forward to the next one. And this
Yeah.
is where it's brilliant having Chris, because he can say, "Yep, these are the ones we haven't answered."
Yep.
Well, we got to most of what's in the chat. There was a pretty lively chat, but we didn't get to all the ones that we had ahead of time. So we've got good. Yeah, you're exactly right. That's where we'll pick up next time. You guys have not scheduled that yet, right? So we're not
No,
ready to announce a
Yeah,
date for next time, or are we?
not yet.
not yet.
All right.
I think we have something in the works, but we don't have a set date.
Well, we are just so happy that, well, I mean, of course, we're sorry that for whatever the reason is, you need to be here. That goes without saying. But we're glad you were able to make it today. We hope you had this or found this session very valuable. And we will be doing more. And obviously, we said this early, if you need specific help, would like to ask a question, whatever, feel free to reach out to any of us. We are all very easy to find. And I'm sure that Lisa and Charlie will share that on as we wrap up.
Yeah, Charlie, you want to say how people can find you, and then I'll say how people can find us.
Absolutely, yeah. So you can find me on my website, which is charliemccready.com. Just follow the spelling as it has it on my little Zoom thing here. You can also go to Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn and YouTube. You'll find me on all of those. Yeah, and just reach out.
Yep. And us, super easy, been there, got out. Our website is beenthere.gotout.com. Our books are Been There, Got Out. We have a podcast called Been There, Got Out. We have over 300 and something episodes, a bunch of stuff with Charlie. We also have a YouTube channel. We have a course coming out, as well as this next book. I'll hold it up again. When Your Ex Turns the Kids Against You. It's releasing March 18th. And the course is also going to be called When Your Ex Turns the Kids Against You. But it's just Chris and I. If you want to reach out, just Lisa at or Chris at beenthere.gotout.com. We have a free half-hour discovery call. If you just book, you can book right on our site. It's a Zoom meeting. But thank you guys for coming, and hope everybody stays safe, and hope you got some hope from today about some of the things that you can do. And of course, we can go deeper and pick this up next time.
And if
Absolutely.
you are in the path of the Armageddon snowstorm, I wish you the best in dealing with that and digging out and moving on with your life.
Yes. All right. Take care, everyone.
Bye bye. Thanks, guys.
Bye.